It all started 6 years ago in 2015 when my son was born. I knew motherhood was going to be tough, but I was unable to manage it all, and I was losing it mentally, which led me to therapy. In 2017, when Landon was almost 2 years old, I started going to therapy. When my therapist at that time asked me if I'd ever been tested or considered ADHD ADD, I was so confused. I didn't know why she was bringing that up. I didn't think of myself as hyperactive. I didn't know at that time that hyperactivity can come through as restlessness, an internal agitation and spinning of the mind, which causes one's mind to run a mile a minute, to fidget, and to struggle to sit still. But then I started researching, and a ton of the symptoms listed for adult ADHD were things I could really relate to. So after finding a local center specializing in ADHD, I was evaluated and tested. And in 2018, I was given the official diagnosis of ADHD inattentive, formerly known as ADD. You see, for years, I'd flown under the radar. I was an excellent student who was well behaved, not the kid running, bouncing off the walls that most people think of when they think of ADHD. I had built up all sorts of coping mechanisms to get me through life, but all of those flew out the window when my son was born. So, what is ADHD? ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Unfortunately, that's a terrible name. The name is very misleading because it's really not a deficit in attention. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder, meaning it affects the way that the brain functions. It impairs my ability to regulate myself, which includes my attention and my emotions. What do I mean when I say regulate? So having ADHD means my ability to control or supervise my own attention and emotions is impaired. Essentially, there are cognitive processes that are called executive functions. These are some of the latest cognitive functions that develop in our brain. Usually, they don't fully form until we're in our mid-20s. For neurotypicals, these are basically the secret to successful adulting. These executive functions help us to regulate ourselves within time and space. They are housed in the frontal lobe of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. This area is underdeveloped in those that have ADHD, which means we have fewer neurotransmitters in our brain, and therefore we have lower levels of norepinephrine and dopamine. Dopamine is known as the feel-good hormone. It plays a role as a reward center in many body functions, including memory, movement, motivation, mood, attention, and more. Less dopamine makes seemingly simple tasks feel like death. Norepinephrine, along with dopamine, helps us to pay attention and focus. So basically, executive functions are the skills that allow you to be in charge of you. All of these skills work together to allow you to self-direct and make conscious choices toward your goals. I want to share with you this analogy, comparing an orchestra and our executive functioning system. Imagine a symphony orchestra where each musician is playing their instrument really well. Each of them are very talented musicians. But if there's not a conductor there to organize the musicians and have them all start together, to signal when the different sections need to get louder and softer, and to help convey the general mood of the piece, the orchestra is going to have a hard time creating beautiful music. When you learn about the symptoms of ADHD, please know that these are not representative of the players. These symptoms arise because those with ADHD don't have the conductor, the executive functioning system, to keep everything functioning and working smoothly all at the same time. Now, before I go any further, it's important to note that ADHD is a spectrum disorder, meaning not everyone with ADHD will experience the same level of impairment or difficulty in these areas. It varies from person to person. I also want to make it 100% clear that there is zero connection between how smart a person is and ADHD. There is no correlation between intelligence and the ADHD brain. Yes, the way the ADHD brain works does make certain tasks more challenging, but it has nothing to do with a person's IQ. ADHD impacts almost 5% of individuals in the United States. There is the primarily hyperactive impulsive ADHD subtype, then the primarily inattentive ADHD subtype, which is what I have, and finally a combined type, where those diagnosed display a mixture of symptoms from both subtypes. So, how does having ADHD affect people? I'm going to share with you a snapshot of ADHD symptoms. There are definitely more than these, but I wanted to focus on these 5 main areas. Focus and attention. Again, it's not that those who have ADHD lack attention. We have too much of it, and our attention keeps getting pulled in different directions. We have the inability to ignore irrelevant noises, conversations, or visual stimulus. The inability to block out unnecessary thoughts in our mind. Inability to focus on what's most important, that task right in front of us. We struggle to stick to one thing until it's finished, especially if it's something we think is boring, because something more exciting always distracts us. Squirrel! Planning and organization. Trouble organizing our thoughts, emotions, tasks, schedules, home, relationships, and everything else. It's hard to make a plan because we can't stop, think, and prioritize. Neurotypicals can look at a list of tasks that need to be completed in a day and organize them in order of importance. Think of it like a vertical list. Now, the ADHD brain looks at everything horizontally, where everything is on the same plane and everything seems to be at the same level of importance. The ADHD brain really struggles to prioritize. My brain likes to tell me that it's all important. It's all screaming and flashing at me at the same volume and at the same time. So I don't know which one to choose, and I struggle knowing where to start, which leads to a lot of overwhelm and shutting down. We struggle to follow step-by-step directions in order. Cooking is a real challenge for me. We tend to misplace important things. We can miss appointments by forgetting or simply getting the dates wrong. We can be time blind, where we cannot accurately estimate the time something's going to take us. Usually we think we have more time than we actually do. Cognitive flexibility or mental flexibility. It's shifting from one task to another. I really struggle from going from work mode into home mode. I have a hard time stopping what I'm doing and switching over into wife mom mode when my brain is still stuck in what I was taking care of for work. It's that transition time and the lack of ease that we have in making these type of transitions. There can be an unwillingness to try new things or explore different ideas. We can struggle with spontaneity or surprises. We have a hard time letting go of past mistakes. We can get stuck in black or white or all or nothing thinking, where there is no gray area. Emotional regulation or self-control. Those with ADHD have trouble processing, controlling, and soothing their emotions. Often get more upset than is normal for the situation. We can be explosive and unpredictable. We feel emotions more intensely than others around us. We can be quick to feel impatient, and our emotions change quickly and easily. Get frustrated very easily. Impulse control. No stop and think. We interrupt people a lot, make rash decisions, jump to conclusions, react too quickly, impulsively start projects without considering all the steps involved, then get frustrated or bored, then impulsively quit the project or task. Most people with undiagnosed ADHD are frustrated, underachieving, and are not living up to their full potential. But when they're diagnosed and begin to manage their ADHD properly, they can turn it into a gift. Now, don't get me wrong, it will always have some negatives, but my work as someone with ADHD is to maximize the positives and minimize the negatives and unwrap the gift. So, what are some of the positives? Well, let's think about that. What could be the good of constantly being distracted and struggling to maintain attention? Curiosity. We are so distracted because we are super curious. We want to know why, how, what. We need to know all the things. Our curiosity drives discovery. This isn't something you can teach someone. Those with ADHD are endlessly curious. If one can learn how to harness this gift, they can do great things. For me personally, I love to find better, more efficient ways to do things. One of the things I find myself saying a lot is, there must be a better way. Creativity. The upside of impulsivity is creativity. One doesn't plan to have a creative idea. It comes spontaneously when you least expect it. And this is where originality and imagination truly come into play. Having the capacity to turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. Resilience. Those with ADHD have a remarkable amount of resilience. We're problem solvers. We think outside the box to find solutions. We keep trying or tinkering around until we figure things out. We're able to bounce back from things. And finally, my most powerful gift is hyperfocus. I like to call it my superpower. When I'm into something, I can stay focused on it for hours or days, as if nothing else matters. I can get so much accomplished when I get in this zone. It can be a gift, but it can also be a hindrance as well if I'm not careful, especially when it comes to my relationships. Relationships may be hard for ADHDers. Forgetting things, explosive emotions, inability to focus on conversations, impulsivity, and anxiety equals a recipe for difficult relationships. So, with all of these challenges that I've dealt with all of my life, I really developed a deep-seated feeling of shame. A feeling that I could never do things right and that I was never good enough. The negative self-talk was on a constant loop in my head that I didn't even recognize it was there. You see, I've spent my entire life trying so hard to mask all of the difficulties I have doing what neurotypicals feel are simple things. Things were never easy for me, but I tried so damn hard. I was exhausted, and I just didn't understand why others didn't seem to be affected with life and tasks like I was. I was the queen of beating myself up, holding myself to such a high standard and struggling with perfectionism. Perfectionism consists of holding yourself to unrealistically high standards and then beating yourself up when you inevitably do not meet those standards. It's setting the bar too high and then shaming yourself for not reaching it. It's unfair, it's cruel, and many of us do it to ourselves constantly. We think we need to do better so that we can feel better, but we have it backwards. We cannot do better until we feel better. You need to feel better, and then you'll do better. For some reason, we think if we beat ourselves up over our past mistakes and failures, this will help us learn and not repeat them. But it's actually the opposite. By beating ourselves up, we are thinking negatively, and then our brain looks for and gathers evidence of all the mistakes and failures that we make. In order to feel better, I've had to accept my ADHD and my own humanity. I've had to stop arguing with reality, stop thinking I should be different than who I am. I've had to learn to set realistic for me standards and decide to celebrate the small wins in life. You see, the reality is that I have ADHD. And the reality is that I'm forgetful, time blind, and I struggle to regulate my emotions. I had to learn to truly accept myself. Now, let me be clear. Acceptance does not equal indifference. Accepting my ADHD and making excuses are two different things. There can be a fine line between the two, but there is a difference. ADHD is not an excuse, but it is an explanation. I hold myself accountable for my actions, and yet I do it with understanding and self-compassion because I recognize that I'm not acting out of selfishness or some sort of moral failing. So I may not be exactly who I want to be now, but I can accept where I am now and still want to be different in the future. Accept your current self. Be kind to him or her. Self-acceptance is an important step to really changing how you think and feel about yourself. The past 4 years for me have been a journey of discovery, healing, acceptance, and growth. Since my diagnosis, I've gained an understanding of why things have been so hard. My drive to be perfect stemmed from me not wanting to feel like what I was doing wasn't good enough. So I either pushed myself to the limit and beat myself up while trying to do things perfectly, or I avoided even trying anything that was new or that I could possibly struggle or fail at. I was basically hustling for my worthiness, as Brene Brown calls it. So having an answer was great, but I wish I could say that's what helped me. Taking medication has helped, but it's not a magic pill. What truly made a difference in my life was joining a group coaching program called Focused with other like-minded ADHDers and learning how to manage my thoughts. I'm not talking about positive thinking here. I'm talking about understanding how our thoughts are connected to our emotions, and our emotions are the fuel to our actions, which ultimately produce our results. You see, I was never taught that. I truly believe that others caused my emotions and they were the reason I was feeling all the things. You made me feel. But no one ever makes me feel. They may say or do something, but that causes me to have a thought. And that thought is what makes me feel. Learning this has changed my life. I may not be able to control what others do or say or situations that happen to me, but I can work on changing the thoughts that I have about it. No matter the struggles I may face, I can control what I think about it. And that is so empowering. Want to manage your time better? Look at your thoughts. Want to have better relationships? Look at your thoughts. Want to learn to follow through? Look at your thoughts. Why is it that we know what to do, but we can't get ourselves to actually do it? Most of the time, the answer is because we're waiting around to feel good. I've had to learn to change my thoughts from this is too hard to I'm willing to do this, even though it's hard. This simple shift of finding a neutral thought allows my brain to take action and produce the results that I want in my life.